So hello everyone, I'm Kay, and I'm really honored to be awarded the Bert Peeters Prize and given this opportunity to present my paper titled Understanding an Atas Singaporean, the Cultural Semantics of the Singlish Keyword Atas at this year's NSM Con. And before I begin, I would just like to thank my professor, Job, for giving me this opportunity to participate in the competition and for also supporting me throughout my development of the paper. And I would also like to express my appreciation to the judging panel, Professor Bert and Professor Goddard, for also providing me with very helpful feedback and comments on my paper. So I'll now proceed with my presentation. Here's an overview of my sharing. I will first introduce the context and objective of my paper before discussing the methodology of my study, which includes the sources of my data. And in the results and discussion section, I will look at the semantic and cultural interpretation of Atas. Lastly, to conclude, I will discuss the limitations and significance of my study. So let's start off with an introduction to my chosen topic. So Singlish is known to be the colloquial language of Singapore. And while it is a well-established variety of English, it is also influenced by the ever-evolving Singapore culture. Examples of commonly used Singlish keywords include kiasu, which roughly means afraid to lose, as well as shiok, which means pleasurable. And in recent years, keywords such as basic and bocil have also been incorporated into the Singlish spoken by many young Singaporeans. However, these words remain largely unfamiliar to many older Singaporeans who are not at the forefront of linguistic change. So why is it important to study Singlish cultural keywords? Firstly, given the evolving nature of Singlish, timely studies are important in providing insights into the Singapore culture for both cultural outsiders and locals. Unfortunately, in general, there has been little scholarly attention to studying Singlish keywords. And because of this, there remains a limited understanding of Singaporean mindsets and behaviors, which has led to Singlish keywords being misused by cultural outsiders on several occasions. For instance, in one tourist promotion video of Singapore in 2013, a cultural outsider was featured using the word shiok to describe contexts that locals would not typically associate the word with. Additionally, ethnocentrism is also common in many existing definitions of Singlish cultural keywords, which typically lack clarity and precision and distort original Singlish meanings. So the cultural keyword I chose to study is atas. It roughly means high class and originates from the Malay word above. It is also important to note that atas is polysemous in that it can refer to either a person or an object. Now, atas may be regarded as a culturally salient keyword in Singapore. It is commonly featured as a must-know Singlish term in Singlish guides and used in headlines of local articles and videos. More notably, atas was also added to the Oxford English Dictionary in 2016, which is a testament to its sustained and widespread usage, and therefore its prevalence in the Singapore culture. So the objective of my paper is to use NSM to study the meaning of the Singlish keyword atas in referring to a person and offer a contemporary cultural perspective as reflected in its use. And I aim to contribute to greater intercultural understanding and encourage a greater appreciation among Singaporeans for their local culture. So now, moving on to the methodology of this study. To analyze the meaning of atas, I collected data from several online sources, including text messages, websites, forums, and social media posts, where atas was used in authentic contexts. I also conducted an online survey with 30 Singaporeans, and the first section required respondents to think of someone they considered atas and to state this person's background, such as their age group and income status. The second section related to Singaporeans' attitudes surrounding atas, which required them to elaborate on whether they liked being associated with this person. And to obtain further examples of the usage of atas, the final section prompted respondents to provide a speech or conversation where they use atas to describe this person. Moving on to the results and discussion section, I will examine responses to my online survey, as well as the examples of use of atas in order to propose a semantic and cultural interpretation of the keyword. So firstly, an atas person is usually a young person, and this was reflected in my survey results, where a majority of respondents thought of an atas person that was aged 30 and below. And examples of usage of atas also shows its tendency to collocate with words like young and kids, as in the example shown here. So this example is taken from an open letter to taxi at no-shows, where a taxi uncle is basically a Singlish cultural category referring to the older male generation. Over here, he draws a clear age distinction between himself as an older uncle and atas young people. So that the partial semantic explication can thus be proposed. They are not children. At the same time, they have not lived for a long time. And I agree with Professor Goddard's comment earlier on that the second line might seem a little too ethnocentric, and I'll be taking this into further consideration when revising my paper for publication. So another salient trait of an atas individual is their high socioeconomic status. Well over half of the respondents thought of an atas person as belonging to the higher income group. And this is also supported by the fact that a large majority of them can afford to live in a landed property, which is generally considered to be the most expensive housing type in Singapore. And these findings imply that atas people are prototypically wealthy. In this example, a Singaporean expresses her unhappiness at a friend who became atas after her marriage to her rich husband, showing that atas may be associated with being rich. Furthermore, the high socioeconomic status of an atas person can be seen in their extravagant tendencies because of their greater purchasing power. When asked to reason why they considered a person atas, one survey respondent remarked how an atas person would purchase the most expensive items, even though there are more cheaper options available. And this can be seen in the following conversation provided by a survey respondent between A and B, who were having a meal at a restaurant when B ordered what A thought was just water. And A was unable to understand why B purchased such an expensive drink that A just considered as water. And as such, A labeled B as atas. So next, a partial model thought can thus be as follows. I can do many things with a lot of money. I can think about this money in this way. It is mine. Now, another distinct feature of an atas person is their refined taste, which manifests in their preference for finer things in life, as shared by a survey respondent. Now, in the first example, the speaker differentiates himself from his friend as he noticed the finer tea that his friend drinks. Interestingly, in using atas to describe someone with good taste, one can also convey a form of admiration as well as a desire to converge with this person, as in the second example. In this forum post, an online user requests atas users to recommend them a good body wash. I therefore suggest the partial semantic explication. They know many good things about good things in life. Many people do not know these things. Because of this, many people want to be like them. Someone atas is also visually identifiable based on the items that they own and wear, since they exhibit good taste in their material possessions. According to survey findings, atas people tend to own tangible goods, such as the latest gadgets, as well as branded goods that serve as strong visual markers of an atas person. So in this example, the speaker identifies his friend as atas based on her physical appearance. The partial semantic explication for this characteristic is proposed. When people see someone like this, they can know that they are someone like this. So an atas person may also speak differently from a typical Singaporean, such as in their spoken accent. So for example, in a forum post asking non-native Singaporean speakers how an atas Singaporean accent might sound like, one described it as a weird hybrid of UK and North American features. According to a user in an online confession post, atas people tend to adopt Anglo ways of speaking to differentiate them as being cultured, worldly, and high class, which are common stereotypes of the Western or Anglo culture in Singapore. And this reflects the romanticization of the Anglo culture by atas Singaporeans, and thus a desire to speak and sound like Anglo people. The proposed model thought goes as such. When I say things in English, I do not want to say things like many Singaporeans do. I want to say things in English like people in America, England say things. And the last proposed characteristic of an atas person is their tendency to look down on people who differ from them. One survey respondent described an atas person as having an aura of superiority. And this idea is consistent with online definitions like that of the Oxford English Dictionary, which describes an atas person as being snobbish or condescending. In this example, the speaker urges atas people to acknowledge blue-collar workers in Singapore who have been working hard for the country. And this reflects an elitist mindset of atas people in their tendency to think lowly of those who differ from them. So a partial model thought is thus proposed. I am someone above other people. There are many people not like me. I do not want to know them well. And putting all partial explications presented earlier, a full semantic explication of atas is proposed in this slide. So moving on to the cultural interpretation of atas, its proposed meaning suggests a multifaceted cultural perspective. So firstly, the use of atas to describe someone may reflect an aspirational quality of some Singaporeans, with one respondent sharing his willingness to be associated with this atas person, as it is nice to hear how it is like to live an atas lifestyle, suggesting that atas people may be revered by some Singaporeans. The concept of atas can thus be seen as an ideal of the sandwich class, which is basically a term used in Singapore to describe the middle class who find themselves stuck in between the haves and have-nots. Atas may reflect their yearning for some aspect of this lifestyle, such as a higher salary and a more luxurious home. Now, an aspirational quality is also reflected in atas people themselves. This was mentioned earlier as well, especially in their romanticization of the Anglo culture. Atas reflects their desire to diverge from the mainstream Singapore identity, such as speaking Singlish, and to redefine their identity by adopting a Western way of thinking and acting, such as in their spoken accent. The use of atas also represents two forms of cultural tensions between various groups of Singaporeans, which arises due to differences in ways of living. Firstly, atas may suggest a form of tension between the older and younger generations. Survey respondents reason that youths of today, in tandem with Singapore's growing prosperity, are raised in increasingly higher income households, and they are therefore more likely to form more extravagant habits. Youths of today are also influenced by Anglified ways of living because of their greater consumption of Western media. Atas also reflects another form of tension between atas people and typical Singaporeans. The extravagance and sense of superiority of atas people are at odds with the values and practices of most other Singaporeans, which are typically associated with hard work and prudence. One respondent expressed their unwillingness to associate with atas people because of their apparent insincerity and tendencies to show off. Likewise, there is a simultaneous desire among atas people to establish a difference with ordinary Singaporeans who do not possess similar traits as them. Now, moving on to the conclusion. So a limitation of this study is, of course, the small sample size of the survey, which means that any findings now remain tentative. Nevertheless, this paper has presented a minimally ethnocentric and precise explication of the Singlish keyword atas via NSM. And the subsequent cultural interpretation of the keyword demonstrates its multifaceted cultural significance. And in studying the meaning of atas and the values it reflects, this paper has sought to promote a greater understanding of the Singapore experience. So with that, I have come to the end of my presentation. Thank you everyone for your attention.